Presbyterians, the heirs of John Calvin, they seem initially to have had a hard time adjusting to the religious culture of the Boston area, then the heart of Congregationalism. One group of Scotch-Irish in America who eventually made their way north to Londonderry, New Hampshire, complained that they resented being labeled Irish, in other words, being lumped in with Catholics, when we so frequently ventured our all for the British crown and liberties against the Irish papists. Memories of sacrifice and violence in the old world were not easily forgotten in New England. Perhaps as a result of the religious prejudice experienced in Massachusetts, coupled with a widespread antipathy to Irishmen of all sorts, the Patten family moved to New Hampshire, where Matthew and his brother obtained a modest tract of land. The Pattens and their neighbors led a hardscrabble existence, coaxing small harvests from the rocky soil, supplementing what they received from surplus yields by engaging in other marginal economic endeavors throughout the year. Like so many other Ulster settlers in this region, Matthew became a jack of all trades, and, according to one historian who has studied these people, he supported a growing family through fishing, fur trapping, land speculation, and the local linen trade, and by bartering his varied skills as surveyor, carpenter, auctioneer, and scribe in return for goods, labor, or, less frequently, paper money, or even scarcer, hard cash. In fact, the only thing that distinguished Matthew from other inhabitants in this struggling community was his diary, a remarkable chronicle of his life and work on the New Hampshire frontier. That the document survived at all is something of a miracle. The records of ordinary people such as Patten are always more at risk of destruction than are those of affluent families. Month after month he noted small business transactions, jobs that he and his sons performed, and events that marked the history of his own family. Patten's journal has special significance. It bears witness to the extra-legal processes, the activities that in fact made the American Revolution a radical event, that drew marginal families into what colonists at the time recognized as the cause of America. How much his political sentiments during the 2 years before independence reflected long-standing ethnic grievances against Great Britain remains unclear. Certainly other Ulster migrants whose background paralleled Matthew's thoroughly disliked the English for the poverty and oppression they had visited upon the people of Ulster, Presbyterians as well as Catholics. One Irishman, living in Virginia on the eve of the Revolution, reminded his brother in a letter published in a colonial newspaper, "You know why I left Ireland. You saw the miserable situation of my family, by a rise in my rent to the double of what was paid before, and by the enclosure of the only ground where I could graze my few cattle. You saw the numerous companions of my misery spoiled, insulted, and abused." The sense of wrong ran deep. One Hessian soldier who fought for the British declared that the Revolution was not an American rebellion. It is nothing more or less than an Irish-Scotch Presbyterian rebellion. He had a point. It would not be a great exaggeration to claim that the American Revolution was Ireland's revolution in America. Most of the time, however, the betrayal that had occurred in Ireland laid buried in the past, dry seeds of a shared identity, capable, under certain conditions, of energizing political resistance in a new land. What little we know about Matthew, other than whatever we learn directly from his diary, derives largely from a bitter fight he waged against the Reverend John Houston, a Presbyterian minister whose authoritarian views on church governance did not sit well with the members of the Patten clan. Houston had graduated from Princeton, and it is possible that he patronized self-educated men like Matthew. That would have been a huge mistake. The members of the Scotch-Irish community in Bedford, where the Pattens lived, insisted on a more egalitarian structure, and Matthew openly berated Houston as Priest Houston. The minister had countered by claiming that his tormentor had instigated strife and debate, confusion and evil work. Patten